Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Accountability by Design, from Standards to Practice. My name is Tomáš Kolárik, and together with my colleague, Božidara Pellegrini, I coordinate educational activities at the National Competence Center for HPC in Slovakia. This session is the final episode of our AI Accountability Dialogue series titled Who is Responsible for AI in Europe? Throughout this series, we have been exploring the question of AI accountability from different angles, starting with the ethical foundations, moving through legal and organizational governance, and arriving today at the technical side. How do you actually build accountability into AI systems, and how do you certify that it is there? What makes today's session truly special is that we have two speakers who approach this question from complementary and sometimes even competing perspectives. Our first speaker is Dr. Maximilian Porečkin. He is head of the Department AI Assurance and Assessment at Fraunhofer EIS in Germany. He leads the Zertifizierte KI project, which develops testing methodologies, assessment tools, and certification approaches for AI systems. Our second speaker will be Dr. Sebastian Hallensleben. He is the chair of CEN-CELNEC JTC 21, the European Technical Committee that is developing the harmonized standard for the AI EU Act. Before we begin, a few practical notes. This session is being recorded and will be published on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to put them in the chat section. We will address them later during Q&A. Maybe you can try to share your slides.
Yes, I will.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for having me, and also being flexible with me jumping over here from another meeting, just catching the second half of Maximilian's presentation. And it's great to be in the same workshop, given that we've also worked with each other in the past on various occasions. So just to briefly introduce myself, I wear a number of hats, but the most relevant hat in this context is chairing CEN-CELNEC JTC 21, the committee that is creating the standards for the AI Act, and that this will also be the main topic of my presentation. I'm also Chief Trust Officer at Resaro, a company that tests AI, and I have roles in the expert work at the OECD and also in a few other venues. So what I'm going to present really complements what Maximilian has already said. It comes more from a compliance and a standardization rather than from a technical perspective, mostly. So I think it's been said before that if you look into the AI Act, it's a long piece of legislation, but it is also not that specific. It is quite generic. You only find high-level requirements, high-level statements there. And that is not because the authors of the AI Acts didn't bother or couldn't agree, but rather it is by design that the details are to be defined elsewhere. And this elsewhere is standardization. So this is a very rough overview of the global standardization landscape, with standardization understood in the kind of narrow, very formalized sense. You have at the international level ISO, IEC, and ITU. You've got within Europe CEN-CELNEC and ETSI. And then in each country, there are national standardization organizations, obviously SEC in Slovakia, and here the examples are shown for Germany. The fact that we have three vertical pillars for general topics, for electrical and IT topics, and telecoms topics, that's really got historical reasons. Unfortunately, at least the first two pillars have agreed to form joint committees to address AI. And even with the third pillar, there are certain formal collaboration mechanisms in place. So JTC 21 is the committee at the European level between CEN and CENELEC. And the special situation we have in Europe is this relationship with regulation. And this is governed by something called the new legislative framework, which is actually a big fat lie. This is not new at all. It's been around for more than 40 years, and it has proved useful for all sorts of technologies, so this is not specific to AI. And this new legislative framework defines this synergy, this collaboration between regulation and standardization. So regulation, as in the AI Act, does provide the objectives and high-level requirements, whereas standardization provides a certain kind of detail. So it provides a formally recognized path for implementing the requirements. The words are chosen carefully here. It's not the formally recognized path, but just a formally recognized path. You can do other approaches for conforming to the AI Act, but if you use this specific one that is developed under the new legislative framework, there's a so-called presumption of conformity. So if you follow the standard, you're assumed to be compliant with the regulation as well. And this is why these standards that have been approved in this way by the EU are called harmonized standards. Again, maybe a slightly strange choice of words, but yeah, it is what it is, has been for a number of decades. And just to take away that harmonized standards means following them is a way of following the AI Act and having that legal certainty of being compliant. So given that this is a fairly important addition to regulation, the approach does not leave it to chance whether someone will kind of sit down and write these standards, but rather the European Commission can issue a formal request, a standardization request that goes to Sensenelec and sometimes ETSI, and it's like a shopping list. So the European Commission says, oh, can we please have a standard for risk management and a standard for governance and quality of data sets and a standard for record keeping and for transparency and for human oversight and accuracy and robustness and cybersecurity and quality and conformity assessment. So these are, broadly speaking, standards for all the high-risk requirements in the AI Act, so Article 8 to 15 and 17 in the case of the quality management system. And then, yeah, experts in Sen and Senelec have started knuckling down and writing standards. And don't worry, I'm not going to go into detail. This is a status dashboard. So each row is a work item. So there's quite a lot to work on. You can see there's also already quite a bit of green. So we are well ahead and we are on the finishing stretch, even though overall it is later than anticipated. And I'll come to that in a moment. Maybe providing a little bit more detail, you can see here this tree structure where you see the elements of the standardization request, or rather the high-risk articles in the AI Act in white, and then all the yellow work items are the core work items that the standardization community in JTC 21 is working on. And these are not standards that operate in empty space. Wherever possible, they build on international standards. There is no appetite for reinventing the wheel if there's already useful international work. And there is also no appetite for unnecessary divergence between international and European standards. So we try to keep it as much together as possible, both for efficiency and alignment. But of course, the AI Act is European, and so standards for the AI Act do have Europe-specific components. So what does it look like in practice? Well, you are in standardization, and therefore you are one of the 25 countries that have a mirror committee and can send experts to JTC 21. We've got around 200 experts there. If you add up all the experts in the mirror committees, there's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 experts. And overall, this is a record size simply because AI affects every applications area, every industry, every segment. It affects a really, really broad spectrum of stakeholders and interests. And yeah, AI simply has a pretty high profile. The working group structure is very unsurprising. And of course, we always look for extra pairs of hands there. I'm often asked, well, why does it take so long? Why is it so hard? Can't you just put a bunch of experts into a room, lock them in and say, well, you're allowed to come out when you've written the technical standards documents? And on one level, that is, of course, true. Yes, one big deliverable in standardization is a set of interconnected and consistent and concise and clear technical documents. However, just as important is the invisible deliverable from standardization, and that is the consensus behind these documents. And it's not just consensus of whoever happens to be in the room, but it's a consensus of all relevant stakeholders. And in the case of AI, a very broad spectrum of stakeholders is relevant. And so that makes consensus quite hard sometimes. But it's still worth working towards because it is the source of legitimacy for standardization. And it also tends to increase the quality of the content if more minds and a broader spectrum of minds are looking at an issue. You can imagine there are many, many fundamental divergences and fault lines within JTC21 that make consensus quite challenging. So, for example, safety and security communities think very differently. They've even got different risk definitions. Then you have different interests between EU and non-EU companies, different interests between AI providers versus AI deployers, different industries between large and small companies, old and new companies, and also different viewpoints between industry, broadly speaking, and civil society. So overcoming these divergences has been the main reason why it has taken quite a long time to produce these standards. However, I'm very happy to say that we have cracked it. We are on the finishing stretch now, and it has been worthwhile to find that consensus. So that takes me to the a brief look at the timeline. Fortunately, we started early. So the initial AI focus group that preceded the current JTC21 was already launched in 2019 in April. So it's coming up to 7 years now of standardization work. Of course, 2024, the AI Act finally went onto the books. We had an initial broad stock-taking review by the European Commission or the AI Office just over a year ago to build a shared understanding of the remaining gaps in the standards. And we are now at a point where the mature drafts of the standards are going into inquiry vote, i.e. the public consultation. The quality management system standard has already completed the public consultation and the comments have already been integrated. So we expect the quality management standard to be published first, and the others are following over the course of the months. So they are launching into inquiry starting in the coming weeks, and then we have the common resolution early autumn, at which point we will have mature content, even though, of course, there are various formal processes in the Commission and in Sensenelec to finalize everything. Set against that is the implementation deadline for high-risk requirements, which until now is August this year, which is a bit too soon compared to the standards, but assuming that the digital omnibus finds its way through the political process, it's likely that this will be pushed to August 27. And then, of course, the standards will definitely be available before then. I am often asked by companies, well, yeah, so we have to wait, we can't do anything. And that's, of course, not true, because there's a lot that companies can do even before standards are available, starting with identifying which AI applications they have in their organizations, mapping them to the risk categories of the AI Act, especially identifying the high-risk ones, scope the implementation projects, allocate resources so that once these standards are available, they just have to execute those compliance projects. And it is perfectly possible to start from the current versions of those standardization drafts. They're not going to change fundamentally until they're finished. Maybe two more words that are slightly broader. Firstly, a word on the code of practice on foundation models. So this is actually distinct from the harmonized standards that we're developing in JTC 21. So JTC 21 has a mandate to build standards for Articles 8 to 15 for the requirements on AI systems in high-risk applications. And this is for all types of AI, not just Gen AI, all types of AI. And it is also for the end of the value chain, kind of the moment where an AI system goes from provider to deployer and actually goes into operation. The code of practice provides details for Articles 53 and 55 of the AI Act, which is much, much narrower. So these are the requirements on certain general purpose models. So this is only generative AI, and this is only the beginning of that particular value chain. And also the process was different. This was a process that was driven directly by the AI office, squeezed into less than 12 months, and with the decision-making power lying with the AI office, whereas the harmonized standards, as I presented, follow the usual set of standardization processes and rules, which is a much, much more complex and deeper process. Both are voluntary, but both have a special status as a path to AI Act compliance with legal certainty. And we do expect that there will be another standardization request that triggers turning the code of practice into a standard eventually, but I don't think this will happen before autumn this year. Final slide. We are sometimes at risk of only looking at compliance and to see it as a burden and to look at all the friction and, oh, isn't it annoying that we have to look at our systems in detail and know what we're doing. It's sensible to, at the same time, consider, well, how am I going to select AI systems? How am I going to go into the market, try to purchase a chatbot product, and then compare those products, those different chatbots? How do I even measure which is the better one? Or conversely, if I'm on the vendor side and I'm producing chatbots, well, how do I prove to the market that my chatbot is better than the competition's chatbot? I can't argue with compliance. I have to argue with metrics that give me a way of differentiating. And just to highlight that there is quite a bit of work happening, some of that initiated by myself from within Rosaro. There's also an open source address here for anyone who's interested. And what we're really trying to answer here is the question, when is an AI solution good enough to go live? And also which one of several AI solutions is better in a given scenario? It always depends on the scenario of use. And on that note, I'd like to conclude. Thank you very much, and I hope we'll have a bit of time for questions and discussions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sebastian. And of course, thank you very much, Maximilian, for your talks. They were really excellent. Now, we have prepared a couple of questions. I want to ask them, all of them, because we also think on our audience, they will have questions for themselves. I'm certain of that. So I start with question for both of you. Can you think of a concrete situation where what the standard requires and what a practitioner can actually deliver were in direct tension? How was it resolved, or was it not? Please choose order in which you would like to answer the question. For example, Maximilian can go first if he'd like to. We don't hear you, Maximilian.
Sorry, I had some technical problems. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So yes, I think in general we have many standards are still missing. So I think the standardization landscape for AI standards is developing at the moment. I think the harmonized standards that Sebastian presented in greater detail will be very important and helpful. But as I said in my talk, we also face the challenge in standardization that the evolution or the technical evolution of AI systems happens at a much greater speed than we can develop actual standards. So if we take a look at data quality standards, there's a first data quality standards out there. But if we look at things like, for example, fairness and bias, which are important requirements on data quality, we see that certain aspects such as stereotypes that are typical for large language models are not covered by these standards, which can be explained that during the time they were developed, people were thinking about usual machine learning systems, but didn't have LLMs in mind yet. And I think that's in general a challenge that we need to think about.
If I look at the tension, I mean, your question kind of points a little bit at, is there one thing that should be done to be compliant with the standard, and to what extent does that conflict with what should be done and what makes sense for a business? I would answer from two angles here. Firstly, even though the AI Act is not particularly elegant, so you can see that there's been a lot of negotiation that went into it, and kind of layers of exceptions and then exceptions of exceptions, and it's not as concise and elegant as it would be if it had been written by a single person. Nevertheless, the substance of what it asks for high-risk systems is mostly stuff that a company should be doing anyway. Not even from an ethics perspective, but from a business robustness perspective. If you, for example, put live let's say a chatbot, you should be knowing what that chatbot is doing, whether it's going to insult your your customers, whether it is going to give out false information that you might be held liable for, whether it falls over the moment someone starts playing around with fancy prompts. You should be doing that anyway, simply from a business perspective. Or as another example, if you use a face recognition system to control access to your production plant, you should be able to be sure that it's reliable and the faces it recognizes, both in a false positives and a false negatives respect. You should be able to be certain of how the enrollment works and which people are in and which people are out. And you should also have a clear understanding of kind of hackability or kind of the resilience against security attacks and so on and so forth. And you also, if that face recognition system fails with a particular person, you should be able to drill into the system to figure out, well, why on earth is Thomas never let into the facility? So what's going wrong there? I need to fix it. I can't just accept computer says no. So the point is that a lot of the substance of the AI Act, even though it's sort of expressed in a weird way sometimes, but the substance of the AI Act makes a lot of sense even from a practical perspective. I think the areas for improvement are more along the lines of, well, can the documentation be more streamlined? Are there other ways of making it more concise, kind of slightly more elegant?
Great, that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much. We will now proceed to second question. This one is for Maximilian, but Sebastian, you are welcome to add your thoughts if you'd like to. Maximilian, you have, I guess, assessed AI systems across different types of organizations. When you compare a large enterprise with hundreds of engineers to a startup with 15 people, what are the biggest practical differences in how they handle compliance?
Well, I think it's there are differences, as you say. So large organizations are usually more prepared to do such things because they do have compliance departments. They do have experts for all the regulation and standards out there that need to be addressed. And this is difficult for a startup because they don't have, they often don't have a legal department at all. At the same time, if you assess an AI system which in a large organization, it's difficult to find the right person who knows the details about the AI systems and can answer the questions of the assessors and auditors. While in a startup, they know their systems because there are just 10 people and you immediately have the right person to ask. So in summary, for large organizations, it's easier to do compliance, in particular also AI compliance, but it's usually more difficult to assess the quality of AI systems within large organizations, and startups have an advantage there.
And maybe to add, startups also find it easier to tweak their product to make it compliant. That's also a big difference. That's more difficult for a big organization. I would also say, I mean, there is sometimes a tendency for startups to say, oh, there's so much friction in the market. We want to launch this product, but we can't because of regulation. But it's an awesome business case. To which I say, well, if your business case only works by ignoring regulation, you do not have a business case. It's like saying, I have this great business case robbing banks, and I have this franchise system, and it's going to work wonderfully. And I'm so annoyed by this regulation that says I cannot rob banks. It has to go. It's slightly exaggerating, but it's kind of a similar mindset that's sometimes apparent in the discussion.
Yeah, that's really funny. Thank you very much. So the third question is for Sebastian. Sebastian, the AI Act relies on harmonized standards that your committee is still developing. What should organizations do in the meantime? Wait or start preparing? And if they start now, is there a risk the efforts become obsolete?
Well, they hopefully have already done the classification of the inventory and classification of their AI systems, which they have to do anyway, regardless of standards. And they have hopefully already identified the usually quite small subset of high-risk applications. And the rest is, well, once you've documented, you don't see it as high risk, you're done anyway. So you're left with a relatively small number of cases. And there you can, of course, already look at the AI Act itself, because this is what you know will need to be implemented. And you also can already look at the draft standards. All those standards are stable enough by now that it's worth looking at the current draft standards to get a sense for how am I going to conform to them. And at the very latest, when they go into public inquiry, they become public, so you don't even have to purchase anything or be part of standardization. Look at them, use them as the initial guide. They are not going to change drastically anymore. That would be the advice. So yes, we're working pretty hard, compressing all sorts of processes to be quicker, but don't wait for the end of the year for all the standards to be published. You can start work on it now.
Great. So the standards are stable enough not
yes,
to compare.
As soon as they go into inquiry, they're going to be public, and they're also going to be stable enough. One thing that is maybe not apparent from the outside, the European Commission is doing a detailed pre-harmonization review. So to check whether the draft is harmonizable, whether it's in line with regulation. They very carefully call it pre-harmonization review because there's another formal step further down the line. But again, they provide a lot of feedback. We integrate the feedback even before going into inquiry. So everything that you see coming into inquiry has the green light from JTC 21 experts and also has the provisional green light from the European Commission. So you can definitely work with it.
Okay, thank you. Maximilian, I'd like to ask, on your perspective, do you think that companies, do you see that companies are still waiting, or are they acting? What do you see?
There's a whole spectrum. We see companies that are very much advanced concerning AI compliance and also AI ethics, who have been active even before there were discussions about the EU AI Act. There are many companies right now who are thinking about how to deal with the AI Act and how to implement it. And there are companies who are finding out currently that there's something like the AI Act and AI regulation, and they realize that they need to hurry up in order to find out what the implications are.
Okay, thank you very much. So, given the time, I have one must-ask question, but I would like to give space for our audience. So I can see that Jarmila has raised her hand. So thank you, Jarmila, for waiting so patiently. Do you have any question? Jarmila probably isn't there. So are there any questions from our audience? If you have questions, please use this opportunity to ask the speakers. If not, I have one question that I believe that is very important for many companies, probably. If a small European AI company has not started with compliance yet, what is the single most important first step you would each recommend? Please, Maximilian, you can go first if you'd like to.
I would recommend them, of course, to get an overview on the AI Act and to start with an analysis of what kind of use cases they have in production, because it depends very much on the use cases you have, whether you need to do a lot of things or whether there's almost nothing to do. So getting an overview what kind of use cases you have in production is a good starting point to further develop AI strategy.
Yeah,
Sebastian.
I would go in a similar direction. So find out what is the small subset of AI use cases that are actually high risk. The rest you're done with. There's pretty much nothing you need to do on the rest. So focus on high risk. And on a broader point, do not treat compliance in one team or one one person's hands and quality in another person's hands and performance in another person's hands. Look at quality of AI systems that you're using in a holistic way. Quality includes that it has certain compliance aspects, that it handles risk well, but also that it performs. Don't buy AI systems by the kilo or by the number of tokens burnt. Have the courage to ask your vendor what exactly that AI system is capable of doing. Don't accept buzzwords, but insist on having clear metrics and clear capabilities. And conversely, if you are a vendor, there is a brilliant opportunity for you to distinguish yourself in the market by being the first vendor in a category to say, look, I'm not just claiming to be compliant, I'm also showing some hard metrics that demonstrate my product is, in certain respects, more powerful, better, more suitable than the competition's products. So let's have a proper competitive market, because a competitive market is what ultimately drives innovation.
Thank you very much. In this webinar series, we focused primarily on non-giants, so not very big companies. Do you feel, Maximilian and Sebastian, that there is something should be said for anyone who, for example, visit this webinar on our YouTube channel and would want to hear? If yes, please go ahead and share it with us.
Well, I would say that AI is a great leveler. So as Maximilian said earlier, small companies are much more nimble, and they can just do things without going through 7 layers of corporate bureaucracy. And they can also stop doing things if it turns out something isn't helpful or efficient, again, without going through 7 layers of bureaucracy. So don't be afraid to experiment, and also don't be afraid to just ditch something that doesn't work for you, and really be mindful of what are you optimizing for. Do not do what McKinsey does, which is apparently to optimize for how many million tokens they burn through, and kind of optimize for how much money they wasted, to be a little bit blunt there. Think carefully, what are we optimizing for? And insist that the AI you use delivers on that.
I agree on that, and would answer in a similar direction. So I would encourage people to embrace the opportunities of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is basically changing every value chain we have currently at the market. So if you don't think about AI, it's not a good idea. And considering AI regulation, I have the impression that we have quite similar situation as compared to when we introduced the GDPR. There were many concerns when we introduced GDPR, and most of them were not necessary. So I would encourage people to be brave to use AI, to take a look at the AI Act. But most of the AI systems are non-high-risk AI systems, and there are not that many obligations.
Okay, thank you very much for these encouraging thoughts and suggestions. Thank you, Maximilian and Sebastian, for your talks and for the excellent discussion. It was really a pleasure having you here. Thank you also to everyone who joined us today. And I wish you a great evening. Yeah.
Thank you for having us, the invite.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.